Parents who regret having kids. Why? Don't get me wrong, I love my son and would do anything for him, but I never wanted to be a mother, and his father basically forced me to have him. He was an accidental pregnancy. We were barely together for only 7 months when we found out, so we were nowhere near ready for a kid. I personally never wanted to be a mom. I was 23 and wanted my independence. I didn't want my body to change and was terrified of labor. I just started school for my career choice. Had plans to fulfill, like travel. I've been in my home state all my life and wanted to see the world first, and was nowhere near emotionally or mentally ready to have a child, and I knew it. His father, however, was more than ready for a kid. Unlike me, his family moved him from state to state almost every year. He has literally been all over in his 22 years of life. He also was already set in his career choice. He told me he felt happy with his life already, so all he wanted now is to settle down with a family, including kids. I was ready for a committed relationship, but not kids. So when we unintentionally got pregnant, it wasn't a happy night for us like it is for most couples. I was bawling my eyes out and he was trying so hard not to show his excitement. I made it clear from the beginning I didn't want to keep this baby. Like I said, I just started school for my career choice a month earlier, and I'd also just started a very part-time job that didn't get many hours to the new person. Even less when they found out I was pregnant. So I didn't have the income to get a procedure, and my fiancé made some good money, so he would have had to help me pay for almost all of it. The problem was, every night I brought up the conversation about what we were going to do, and I'd remind him that this wasn't what I wanted. In the moment, he'd tell me, "Okay, if you don't want to become a mother, I won't force it on you. We'll figure something out." But then the very next day, he'd go on talking about this future baby we were going to have like my feelings didn't matter. Eventually, it got to the point where I was too far in to be able to have the procedure safely, and my fiancé fed off of my motherly instincts that eventually kicked in. I could no longer have the procedure. So I had the baby. And having him in my arms, I couldn't bring myself to give him up for adoption even though this wasn't what I wanted. I've always cared for my son. I'm your typical paranoid first-time mom that worries about everything, but deep down, I still feel like I don't want this kind of life. And sometimes I want him to be 18 and grown already so I can relax and let him do his own thing. I know parenting doesn't stop at 18, and I will always be there for him. All I'm saying is I'm not one of those parents who enjoys the newborn and toddler years. My son is 1.5 years old now, and I love him like crazy. But it took me a long time to get over my resentment for my fiancé for not considering my feelings and forcing me into this. I find it hard to enjoy time with my son sometimes because I'm the type that's not used to having a human baby attached to me 24/7. I miss Sam because we don't have many people in our life who will help us with him. I had to make all the sacrifices to have a kid, such as giving up 99% of my snake hobby because having a newborn in the same house as 10 plus snakes poses some safety risks, or such as giving up on my purpose in life to rehabilitate animals because a kid takes up all my time. And my body has changed drastically in ways I wish it never did. And as an added stressor, his father has a rare genetic disease that makes it highly possible he won't live past 40, and that disease has been passed down a few times through his family generations. So I hope and pray that my son has not inherited that disease from his father. And at the same time, I also struggle with immense guilt for feeling this way, because I know a child deserves to have a parent who wanted them and enjoyed them. He'll never know I feel this way. That only stays between me and his dad because, despite my feelings, I am trying hard to be the kind of mother he deserves. I can't say I regret having him. I've just always felt like this wasn't my purpose in life. I don't want any hate for my ways of feeling, and I don't deserve it either. I take great care of my son, and I love him more than anything. Even if he wasn't exactly wanted in the beginning, all I'm doing is sharing my experience. Story 2. Expenses. Children are expensive. So much so. The American average to raise a child from birth to 18 years old, barring disabilities, medical conditions, or special needs, is $250,000. You're literally paying the genetic lottery. You might have had no issue growing up, but you might carry a debilitating recessive trait that's passed on to your child. Side note, the average cost for the hospital birth is $9,000 to $15,000 if you're uninsured. Don't get me started on childcare. It's more expensive than most in-state tuition for college. Things ease up as they're older, but money is shifted around in different ways that it doesn't make much of a difference. Time. Screw your free time. Your independence is gone. You have to find a sitter or hope your partner, friends, or family can step in for a bit. You can't take a dump without your kid spilling his milk on the carpet for 5 minutes and crying like crazy. Exhaustion. Parents are tired. Parenting takes a monumental sacrifice of your life in ways I can't explain. Your next move in life will always involve your child, and your carefree living isn't there for a good while. I underestimated the involvement and sacrifice it takes to raise a child. Had I known this before, I would have been child-free. Societal expectations. You've probably been force-fed the same line after line from your family. Finish school, go to university, get married, have kids. You don't have to have kids at all. You don't have to go to college to accrue so much debt. You're questioning the worthiness of your degree. More I can get into, but you see the point. Kids are optional as far as I'm concerned. Story 3. My life feels like it's no longer mine. I feel as though I'm constantly under someone's thumb now, and the freedom I once had to say screw this isn't making me happy, isn't available to me anymore. Because what feels best for me isn't necessarily what's best for my family. It's tough, and I've had a hard time reconciling with that. Some days I feel like I've got this and everything will work out in time, but more often I find myself feeling pretty hopeless and that this life I've been trying to build and maintain for the good of my family is nothing but a ticking time bomb. I find peace in knowing that this has resonated with others. I do, however, want to make it clear that I love my family, and my struggles are in no way a reflection of them. I plan to speak to a counselor about my feelings at the start of the new year in the hope of finding new, healthy ways to cope. Parenting is not for everyone, and I wish I would have known this about myself before diving in head first, but I truly thought I would feel differently. Despite my feelings, I know I've had a responsibility to my child first and foremost, to give her a life that equips her for the road ahead, that allows her to be happy and know that despite my shortcomings, I love her very much. Story 4. From the side of the regretted kid, my parents didn't want to be parents. All there is to it. You know the expressions, you're never ready and it'll all work out? It didn't work out and they're all still not ready. My dad stepped up only because his parents forced him to, and he did the bare minimum. He doesn't like at all for it to be acknowledged he has a daughter. My mom made it obvious she wouldn't be parenting if she wasn't stuck with it. Side note, she's not a believer in termination. Go figure. They're a couple now because being over 18 no longer obligates my father to child support. That and my mom is the only woman willing to put up with a 50-year-old man who can't look after himself. No, he's not disabled. I don't doubt my mom loves me, but she's made it clear she wouldn't do it again if she could reverse time. I'm not offended. I learned it's a generational thing. My grandparents didn't want to be parents and were awful with their kids. My parents didn't want to be parents and were awful with me. I don't want to be a parent, but I don't have a kid. And if that desire changes, I refuse to do it without therapy to improve on myself to some degree first. Story 5. A friend of mine had this happen to her. Husband wanted kids, family wanted grandkids. Everyone said she'd make a great mother, and she caved to the peer pressure and social expectation. She was married, the next step was babies, and she just did it. It ended up being twins, a boy and a girl. She's a fabulous mother, but sadly it's out of guilt. She hates being a mom. She's at every soccer game, every PTA meeting, hosts birthdays and special events. She's Supermom. She does this because she's trying to make up for how much she resents ever having kids. Nobody but her closest friends know she's counting the days until her kids are out on their own. She and her husband already have the divorce papers signed and waiting in a drawer. They're just co-parenting until the kids are grown. That woman wants nothing to do with family. She's got a special savings account and has already planned out her escape from domestic life. To her credit, she knows how much it's going to mess up her kids when they finally learn the truth. I always thought they would catch on, but they're teens now and they both seem ignorant to her aspirations. She's made sure that they all have both family counseling and personal therapy. She's been forthright with a therapist. She harbors no delusions about how this is all going to go down eventually, but in her own words, if I didn't have my exit strategy and my early retirement plans in place, I'd have probably ended it all long ago. Some people shouldn't be parents. Some parents really shouldn't push their kids to become parents. Not everyone is cut out for it. Just having that backup plan in place can be a literal lifesaver. Knowing if you need to, you have an out. Almost makes everything else a choice, which is more manageable. I'm sure she's glad she has a supportive friend who won't judge her. On a lighter note, please do hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Story 6. I've been holding on to this story for a while. My wife is 5 years older than me. This was never an issue until she wanted kids when she was 30. I would have liked to wait until I was 30. We split the difference when I was 27 and she was 32. I still didn't feel like I was ready, but my wife had always been a natural caregiver with decades of experience taking care of her younger siblings. Because she wanted to have kids so much, I trusted her to be able to pick up my slack and inexperience. I should not have. For the next 2 years, my wife kept me and my daughter at arm's length. When I came home from work, she would say, "I looked after the baby all day. You take her." And when she came home from work, she would say, "I had a hard day at work. Can you give me a bit before handing me the baby?" My daughter had a milk allergy, so I formula fed our daughter every few hours. My wife never did. I had not slept for more than 3 hours at a time for the first 6 months. I did 90% of the diapers and 100% of the baths. I had to scale back to part-time work and had to become the stay-at-home parent. I never even discussed my wife scaling back her work hours. For those of you who can read between the lines, my wife had postpartum depression badly. She knew. Her doctor knew. But she was too ashamed to tell me. Instead, I just had to feel alone and confused for 2 years while I figured out how to basically become a dad from scratch. Years later, my daughter is 8 now and amazing. My wife has become an amazing stay-at-home mother. After those 2 years, my wife started taking medication and therapy for her depression, and I went back to school to become a teacher working full-time. We're good, and I love my family like crazy now, but both my wife and I silently agreed that we would never have another child, and both took medical steps to ensure this. We don't talk about the first 2 years anymore, ever. But when we absolutely have to, we refer to them as the bad years. I would not give up my daughter for anything. She's hilarious and sweet, but sometimes I wonder, if I could do it all over again, would I? Story 7. This is addressed to parents who regret having kids, but I figure I can sneak in on a technicality here. I regret having my son, sometimes. I think if they were honest, all parents admit they do, but I also think all people regret their choices as they get older and they just have fewer and fewer choices. The path not taken is always going to be full of possibilities simply because it never actually happened. It can remain a dream. My son is an extremely difficult child, and he's a joy. I had him very late in life, and I think I had enjoyed all my youthful freedom enough. Life had started to feel a bit shallow and without a purpose larger than myself, and I love him more than I can express, but still, when he's being a brat, I sometimes worry I wasted my life. And when he's the best version of himself, I feel like he's the best thing I ever did. Ambivalence is the nature of life. So, basically, conditional love. Okay, got it. Story 8. As a kid who was methodically planned and wanted, but born from a desire for my mom to have a best friend, I feel like I can speak. When I was young, it was excellent. Had lots of trips to museums, lots of activities I could do, and sports to play. My mom stayed at home, so none of the transportation was an issue. When I went to middle school, however, some of the worst emotional and verbal lashings, accompanied by physical ones occasionally, were common. I was becoming a person, and she thought threateningly harming herself and screaming and trying to drive us off the road in her car would be good. I have autism too, so my love for physical affection as well as capacity to give it disingenuously is not great. This was seen as a personal attack against her. Sometimes she got so weird and vile that I genuinely wished I was the first pregnancy she ever had that was terminated. I never engaged in her fistfights. Finally stopped buying into her theatrics and kept looking for an out. I've been away from my parents for 3 years now and have very selective or limited contact with her. She's devastated. She has no friends, no support network, but that is not my fault. She used me as a replacement for genuine adult friendship and in turn, messed me up and set herself up for failure. Don't have kids if you're lonely. They will grow up and they will resent you for creating a human life to be their best friend. Story 9. It ruined my marriage. We'd planned on not having kids. Due to a gap in birth control for 1 month and one drunkenly bad decision to forego protection during that month, of course, we got pregnant. We're both staunchly pro-choice, but when faced with it, she couldn't go through with terminating. So we decided we'd make it work. I will preface all of this with her history. We'd been together for 9 years when she got pregnant. Our relationship was stellar. We didn't get out very often, but we always were able to enjoy each other's company in a way that just felt wonderful. We loved each other, wholly. So, the downfall. The pregnancy was fine, as was the labor. The postpartum led to a lot of stress given that I was working of traveling to and from work for 16 hours a day. And when I got home, she needed relief, which I was always willing to give. So for the first 6 months or so, neither of us really slept. Our mental health was definitely deteriorating, but there was simply no time or money to take care of ourselves when we had the baby to take care of. In hindsight, we should have made the time to get therapy during this crucial time. Things eventually got better with the sleep deprivation, but my wife eventually grew to resent me for not being home enough. My work left me very little home or free time, and several times accused me of taking extra work so I wouldn't have to be at home. This was never true, but her animosity toward me grew over the course of the next several years. It became her lashing out at me about anything she could think of, and deflecting any time I came forward to talk to her about how I felt. I eventually hit my breaking point. I couldn't be in the house with her without feeling terribly anxious that something I say or do will send her off yelling at me. Eventually, I had to move out of the house for my own sanity. We tried couples counseling, we each individually went to therapy. All parties involved kind of realized we were just too far gone to reconcile. I really miss the way things were before our child. I'll always love her, but damn if I don't regret some of the choices that we made. P.S. I absolutely love her son. He's an amazing person and makes me proud to be his father. I hold absolutely no ill will toward him. If the love of my life had to wilt away to make him the person he is, I think the world is better off for it. Story 10. I don't necessarily regret it. I love my kids, but being a parent sucks sometimes. I used to be a person, now I'm an NPC in someone else's story, and that's okay. That's the job and I get it, but I'm constantly daydreaming about the things I used to do or used to dream about doing. But it all comes crashing back down when I think about the reality of raising a family and a middle-class income. I'm going to spend the next 20 years paying off debt, and by the time that's gone, inflation will eat up all the top end of my salary, so I won't be any further ahead than I am now. I'll never get to go on that solo backpacking trip. I'll never have the disposable income available to indulge anything more than minor hobbies, and even then it will be at least another decade before I even have time to commit to that. I wanted to see the pyramids. I wanted to buy a cabin up north and stay there for a while. I wanted to move to Japan too and teach and maybe discover a little more about myself. I wanted a motorcycle, a CSBA license. I wanted so many experiences, and I'm sure I can have similar, maybe even better experiences with my family. But now I have so many more considerations and responsibilities. So many beautiful places I wanted to see and things I wanted to do, and people I wanted to meet that just aren't appropriate or too expensive or too dangerous for kids these days. I fall asleep fantasizing about that Ducati ride through the Ireland sunset that will most likely just never happen. But I do love my children very much. Parenthood is a roller coaster of conflicted emotions. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.